Let me just start off by saying good afternoon. My name is Abdullah Snowbar. I'm the Executive Director for the DMZ. It's a pleasure having you all with us. And as many of you know, the DMZ is a business incubator accelerator program supporting tech startups to reach global expansion, which enables them to foster more made in Canada jobs. So on the call today, we are delighted to have Francis McRae, the Assistant Deputy Minister for Small Business and Marketplace Services for Science and Economic Development, as well as David Lisk, the Vice President of the International Research Assistance Program, otherwise known as IRAP. This call is going to focus on preparing tech leaders across Canada for their IRAP Innovation Assistance Program, IAP, applications, and receive some clarity on some of the more inclusive criteria around Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, business loans, and hopefully some more. So we have some people that have joined from across the country today, including many startups from our ecosystem, including partners in BC, Alberta, Quebec, New Brunswick, and PEI, and a few more. We've looked over a number of the questions from startup founders, and we hope to get through as many as them as possible. But we also have the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screens. You will see where you can actually ask questions, and we'll be bringing some of those questions up on the call later on. So if we don't get to your question, we will work with Francis and David's team to get your questions answered and sent over to you by email as soon as possible. So again, apologies in advance if we don't get to all of your questions, but we want to try to get to as many as possible. So that's, I don't want to spend any more time talking. I want to kind of get right into it. So first of all, Francis and David, welcome to the call. I hope you and your families are doing well at this time. And we really appreciate you carving out some time on a Friday to do this. I want to first give each of you a couple of minutes to discuss your roles and the programs you've announced to support Canadian startups and scale-ups, specifically the IRAP Innovation Assistance Program funding for David, and the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program, and up to 40K of business loans for Francis. So I'll hand it over to you folks. Maybe Francis, we'll start with you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that introduction. So very pleased to be here today. We've had certainly spent a lot of time the last month or so, feels like longer than that, working with various business communities and making sure that we're listening to what they're experiencing, and also to be able to respond to some of the challenges around the programs that have been announced, the measures that have been announced, and where people are struggling with some of the eligibility pieces, which as you've seen the government be able to kind of iterate and move on making changes based on that feedback. So we're really pleased to have that. I think most of what you want to talk about today probably falls more into my colleague Dave Lisk's area, but I will just say that we are starting to see now many more measures moving into implementation. So you'll be familiar with the emergency response benefit that has started now for a couple of weeks and is moving very, very quickly, the funds to those who have applied and are eligible. The second one being the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the 75% version of that, which now CRA has a portal up on its website, being able to explain how it works and to allow people to calculate what they would be, employers to calculate what they would be eligible for. That portal opens for applications on April 27th, so Monday. CRA has devoted a lot of time and attention to both the emergency response benefit and the wage subsidy service side of things with dedicated numbers. And that actually, the feedback I'm getting is it's working very well in terms of people getting quick answers. So that's positive. And then we talked today, the Prime Minister has just made an announcement around the new rent subsidy program, which we'll get more details on. I just saw the news release, so I haven't had a lot of chance to read it in detail. But we're seeing more and more things move into implementation. Of course, the liquidity measures under the Canada Emergency Business Account have been rolling out. And then we're seeing the additional products, the EDC loan guarantee program, the BDC co-lending program, also in implementation. BDC, I think as of kind of today, is moving into implementation on that with many, many financial institutions involved. So those are just kind of the top line. There are other measures, the one that Dave that Dave is talking about, but I think is probably the one most relevant to you. But I'm happy to answer whatever I can on the more general programs, as well as we'll take further questions, as was noted, that I'm not able to answer. I would just add, my department is not a delivery agent for either the emergency response benefit, for the wage subsidy, for the business credit availability program. But we do see it as our role to be a kind of conduit into and out of the business community as the business department. So I'll maybe just leave it at that.
Good morning, Abdullah and Francis. Thanks for that nice overview. Also, Abdullah, thank you for the opportunity to allow me to present an overview of IRAP and the IRAP Innovation Assistance Program. So I'm Dave Lisk. I'm the Vice President of the National Research Council Industrial Research Assistance Program. And as many of you tech leaders probably know, NRC IRAP has been in business of supporting innovative small and medium-sized companies for a long time. In fact, we've passed our 70th anniversary of existence. When the situation of the spread of COVID-19 arrived in Canada, the Government of Canada has taken many actions, and Francis has done a great job of giving a quick overview of the key ones that would affect the audience today. And so I'm going to focus really on IAP. So on April the 17th, so exactly one short week ago, the Prime Minister announced this program, and it is intended to support firms who are in the innovation space where other government supports, in particular CEWS, is not eligible to them. And it's very important that folks who are on this call understand they should review their situation against the portal to determine whether they are eligible for CEWS, because that's the main support mechanism for firms, and we are an additional support for those who are not eligible. It is also a limited fund. It is not eligibility based, it is merit based, and it is discretionary. And filling out the form that is online, and we've tried very hard, we are government, but we've tried very hard to make it as simple and as straightforward as possible, so firms are able to complete it easily and without a significant burden on them. In the end, the funding that we received was intended to support about 1,000 companies and about 10,000 jobs. So we will have a significant number of companies apply, and we will have to select amongst those the ones that we support. Now, should I continue and talk about the basic eligibility, Abdullah?
Sure. Why don't you talk about the basic eligibility, then we'll get into questions right after that, David. Thank you.
Okay. So the website does describe it, and I think that there's maybe 3 or 4 points that folks who are on the call and are listening should take a notice of. First of all, I mentioned Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy. You can't be eligible for that. Second, classic IRAP basic eligibility still applies. You have to be incorporated, you have to operate in Canada, and you have to be less than 500 employees. You also have to have a registered BN or a CRA business number, and you had to be incorporated before the COVID situation struck. We were only supporting firms that were in existence. And we are picking firms, and this is perhaps a difficult concept, but we are picking firms who have obligations in their entirety as a company that are likely not to be able to survive for the 12-week period over which we are supporting the firms, and we are only supporting firms for a 12-week period. So I'm going to stop there and hand it back to you, Abdullah.
Thank you very much, David. So I want to get to some of the questions and make sure that we get some good coverage and time to get as much in as possible. But I want to ask the first question from Alex Gill from the Social Venture Zone, and the question is to Francis actually, and it's will there be any further refinement in loan criteria for SMEs to include those that may use contractors rather than formal payroll?
Thanks for that question. It's certainly one that has been identified many, many times, and we provided some specific examples of folks who are in particular situations around contract labor. So we have discussed this with the Department of Finance. They're certainly well aware of the challenge of the specifics around the payroll at T4 requirement. I'm not going to be able to speculate on whether there will be changes. I can tell you that ministers have heard this loud and clear. The government's heard it loud and clear. Members of Parliament continue to make this point, just even as of yesterday when Minister Ng was in front of the Industry Committee. I know it was part of the parliamentary debate on April 11th. So you can rest assured that is being heard. What I can't really speculate on what government will decide on it, however.
Okay. Thank you, Francis. Next question we have is from Paul Dubois from Sovar asks, David, under the criteria for IRAP funding, it says one of the criteria is lacks sufficient financial resources to sustain operations during the COVID-19 downturn period. I know that Samir asked the same question as well. So how will this criteria be applied to pre-revenue startups, especially when they either rely on prior grants or have very minimal financing to show for their early stage business operation?
So that's a good question, and it's one that we've been asked several times. This program was identified to support pre-revenue companies, in fact. Because CEWS requires that a firm demonstrated a revenue decline, if you're pre-revenue, by definition, you're not eligible. So this program that we've established is to allow pre-revenue companies to apply. It is incumbent on the firm to answer the questions that they see in front of them in the best way they can. We will be reviewing all of the applications, and a revenue decline will not be part of the considerations for the applicants. And we will then review the firm's innovation status and strategy and descriptions that they provide, and on a merit basis, take decisions on who we can fund.
Okay, and maybe on that same point, David, from a question from Mohsen Omrani, he's saying, do previous IRAP status, whether application or receiving funding from before, does that affect the decision for the current IRAP application, or are they going to be still okay to apply?
Actually, thanks for that question, because it's very important. Whether you are a previous IRAP recipient or we've never heard of you and you're not part of our contribution suite, you have to apply for this program. It is completely independent of regular IRAP. Also, if you have an IRAP project underway at this point, you are still eligible to apply. But again, you have to apply directly through the portal, because that is the only way we are collecting applications.
Okay. And before we move on to Francis, I just want to get one point of clarification, David, just from Samer again. So on the point of sufficient funds criteria, what if a company has enough resources to survive, but not enough to continue to push growth aggressively?
The way the description is written, it's to meet your obligations as an organization. And so the firm must decide whether they're going to mothball themselves or not, and then put that description forward.
Okay, thank you, David. We have a question from Rachel Wrong from ClickDish. She's asking Francis, why has the business loan of up to $40,000 not turned into a grant for startups?
Thanks very much for that question. Again, the policy on this is being made at the Department of Finance. I'm not able to sort of speak why they're using one measure over another measure. I can tell you that they are looking at what's going on all around the world in terms of other models. I did hear Minister Morneau say to the Finance Committee that, he's speaking as an example to his counterparts on all kinds of things that they're doing, including, the rent subsidy program. I know he was speaking to his Australian counterpart about it. Why is one vehicle being chosen over another? That's a good question. I would need to kind of have the policy depth that the Department of Finance went into on that. I think my sense is, there are a lot of other, straight kind of direct subsidy models that are being used. As an example, the emergency response benefit is a straight payment. The wage subsidies, up to 75% is a payment out. I guess my sense is there's kind of a range of measures. The totality of those measures is really what the Department of Finance is trying to keep a handle on to make sure that there's balance there in terms of need. So, as I said, why one measure over another? I wouldn't be able to speak to. I do know that there are other areas where there are direct payments being made to businesses and individuals through some of the other measures.
Okay, thank you, Francis. I know there's been a lot of questions being asked in the chat box, so I'm going to turn things over to Ahmed Saleh, who's our GR manager, to quickly pick up a couple of those questions and ask both David and Francis. So Ahmed, over to you for a second.
Thank you, Abdullah. The first question is for David here. It says, one of the criteria is, open quote, plan to pursue growth and profit by developing and commercializing innovative, technology-driven, new or improved products, services, or processes in Canada, close bracket, or close quote, sorry. How exactly will we be quantifying this, or what sort of documents or information will the program be looking for to meet this criteria?
So the application form, and I did quickly scan through the questions, and someone asked where to find the form. Literally, use your favorite search engine and search for the National Research Council of Canada. And right on the banner page, it's the very first thing you can click on to go to the forms. So that's how you find it. The answer to your question in terms of evaluation with respect to innovation, we're asking for firms to describe their innovation in very few words. We, as a program, work with over 10,000 companies a year. We have 255 field staff who are trained to work in innovation spaces, whether they're agri-food, high-tech, nuclear science, etc. And they will be reviewing your very short statements and determining your ability to, that you are actually actively operating in an innovation space, or an innovative space. And I would add that also includes innovation in business models, not simply creating a hardware widget or a software service. It could be a business model innovation.
Thank you, David. The next question is payroll a requirement to be eligible for IAP, and will one be allowed to pay their contractors using the IAP fund?
Okay, so having employees that are working inside of the company and that would receive a T4 or a T4A statement at the end of the year is a requirement for eligibility. We are not supporting contractors who send an invoice to the firm stating their services are worth X dollars. There are other subsidy programs that the federal government have put in place to support those human beings. So it is really staff inside of the firm, which is in keeping with IRAP's traditional view of building intellectual capacity within the construct of the company.
Thank you. Abdullah, do we have time for one more, or do we want to have it back to you?
We have time for one more, Ahmed. Go ahead. And I'm going to ask a couple after that as well. Go ahead, Ahmed.
Perfect. So there's some questions around the regional development agency funding. Will this money be in loans or grants, and when will it be available? Can either one of you provide an answer for that?
I can go, Francis. So
yeah, go ahead.
This funding that was designated at the same time as IRAP received its request to put a program in place was given to the regional development agencies with a mandate to support a much broader context. The ability to put a project in place with an individual firm, I would say traditionally, the support has been a repayable contribution, so it's a loan and you have to pay it back. That is traditionally what happens. And I think that it would be safe to assume that that would be the most common mechanism that would be used by RDAs when engaging with an individual company.
Okay, thank you very much, Ahmed. Just, I want to remind the folks on the call today that there's a lot of questions coming in, so I know we're not going to be able to get to all of them. What we will do, and we promise we will do, is that we'll try to follow back up with Francis and David's teams and get back to you guys with these answers. But there are a couple of questions that I just kind of saw pop up that are probably worth asking because it might be relevant. One question from an anonymous attendee says, for a business that is not sure if they will apply for the regular 75% wage subsidy program because we don't have April financials, should we apply for the new IRAP program, which has a deadline of April 29th? What if we then find out if we are eligible for the regular program once the month ends and we have the figures?
So firms, it depends, I suppose, on how variable your month end can look like. I would encourage firms to take their best decision around being eligible. And it is possible to withdraw your application from IAP if you discovered that you were eligible for CEWS. That would certainly not be a problem. And there was a question about the 10% wage subsidy. And just a quick note on that, everyone that is eligible for that is eligible for that. And when you apply for IAP, that 10% will be taken into account as part of your funding support, and you must reduce your request to be in line with the fact that you're already receiving that, as you would make a claim, not in your application, but later on if you are selected when you make your claims.
So it's Francis here. Maybe I would just add one thing. So I mentioned earlier about the calculator on the CRA website. I really do encourage people to go. As Dave is saying, it is a business decision about, whether you apply, but the calculator is live now. It's available. There are a lot of detailed Q's and A's on the website. And I know for a fact, having spoken to CRA at the assistant commissioner level, they are taking every bit of feedback that they're getting around the calculator and how it's working, whether it has gaps in it, and their phone line is really quite good. People are getting answers to their questions. So I would really encourage you on that and on the CERB, if that applies to you, do phone the CRA. They are seriously retooling to be able to meet demand, and they know that these are really important business and personal decisions that people are making every single hour. So I would just maybe leave that with you.
Thank you very much. And then a question from Sam CEO from LiveGauge. What happens after the last wage subsidy date in June? Will it be renewed and extended?
That would be a decision by the government. We have been asked to deliver this program with those timeframes, and we are working towards doing that. Any extensions would be in the hands of the political folks who decide how they want to move forward.
Right. I would just say on the wage subsidy, the regular wage subsidy piece, the legislation that's put through on the wage subsidy allows the government to extend past June 6th. And clearly, you know, as Dave is saying, lots of considerations to be made about a whole range of measures and what may be required in terms of extensions or additional measures based on a very, very rapidly evolving situation.
Okay, wonderful. Last question, and this is kind of off topic, but I think very relative to a lot of the people on this call today. Just looking at the time, I know I don't want to kind of go too long into it, but what are you folks learning about the procurement process through the pandemic? And are there best practices that have been picked up in regards to the procurement? And is there going to be a chance for the Canadian government that will allow it to change its approach to procurement through these times based on supporting or allowing startup companies to be able to apply through it? So it's a broad question, I know, but I think it's one that a lot of people ask us all the time.
Yeah. So as there's going to be a significant number of learnings that come out of the evolution through the pandemic, and government procurement practices are certainly going to be one of those. For the innovative firms, there are several processes that exist already, like buy and sell through the PSPC website, so Public Works for folks who are older than 15 years ago. Also, Innovative Solutions Canada, with its challenges and its test stream, they all exist today. The government has leveraged those to kinds of things and more to ensure that innovative firms with really strong COVID response capabilities are being reviewed and assessed to participate in the solution set through purchase orders or through grants and other mechanisms whereby their products can be brought into the market to support the overall response. All of those learnings will then be reviewed in time as the pandemic is conquered, and permanent changes may or may not occur, but that we're way too early to make any decision on that.
Okay. Well, Francis and David, thank you both very much for taking the time to speak to our community of startup founders from across the country today. We've committed already that any questions that were not answered, we will go back, work with your teams to try to get the answers. We will share it with all the participants on the call today. And we look forward to the additional measures your offices will be putting together to help reach the full economic recovery and come out of this thing better together. Thank you again for your endless support and work. Best of luck, stay safe, and goodbye.
Thank you very much for the time, and be safe, everyone. Bye now.